Hello there and welcome back to the B Show. Today we will be doing our first ever book review. Ooh la la. It's cold in my house today, so we got a blanket. Look at this. I'm like a big banana taco. For those who don't know, my name is Brendan. I'm currently getting a BA in English. I'm an actor. I have a TikTok at the B Show if you want to check it out. But this is my first book review and I decided to do it in like a two-step kind of process. I will do a general synopsis and review and rating. And if you haven't read the book, then I would suggest stopping the video there. If you have read the book, then I'm going to carry on into a more in-depth conversation and analysis about the book and some themes and imagery and stuff like that. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It was excellent. I enjoyed it very, very much. So basically the protagonist is Lisa, a young indigenous woman, and the book is told from her perspective, first-person narrative, and it jumps between the present and the past. The main through-line story, which is in the present, revolves around Lisa and her brother Jimmy. He goes out fishing and the boat goes missing, and Lisa goes on a journey to find him. And in the long run, she ends up finding herself. But that story is intercut between stories from the past. Basically, Lisa's whole history and what made her into the woman she is today. We meet a lot of influential people in her life. Her uncle, her grandmother, her parents, her friends, and of course her brother. Lisa's a very spiritual person and is in tune with the spiritual side of life, but she doesn't quite understand it or know how to work with it. And this causes a lot of the anguish in her life. It was very straightforward and to the point, which I prefer much more than overly descriptive. But it still had enough description that it gave you a good, vivid image when you read it. I really enjoyed her writing style, and the book has a good mix of tragedy, humor. There's a lot of different elements in it, and the humor really helped. Overall, it was a very easy book to get through. It was an easy read, enjoyable, and had fascinating elements mixed in with the reality. Even some educational moments for me personally, involving the indigenous culture and traditions. Speaking of, while I was reading up on the indigenous culture, I did come across something called the Earth Diver mythology, which are stories that revolve around someone diving down to the bottom of the ocean or sea or whatever it may be and coming up as a sort of rebirth. And after reading about that, I am sure that Robinson is honoring the Earth Diver traditional story with this book. So yeah, that is my brief synopsis and review for those of you who have not read the book, and my rating would be 4 out of 5. So for me, that is a highly recommended. Just so you understand my scale, I would say 5 out of 5 is a must read, and 1 out of 5 is avoid and don't waste your time. So 4 is a highly recommended. That is what this is. Monkey Beach. If you haven't read it, please do check it out. I think you will thoroughly enjoy it. Okay, now that we got rid of those losers, we can have a real conversation. No, I'm kidding. But yes, now let's get into a more in-depth analysis and review of the book. So I guess I'll start with characters. Lisa is very much caught between two worlds. The living world and the spirit world. Also, the Western world and the indigenous world. Oh, she's torn in so many ways. Now that I'm saying this, gender-wise, she's a woman, but she almost portrays herself to be more manly, to blend in. The novel as a whole is obviously a coming-of-age story for Lisa, more so than a story about finding Jimmy or about what happened to Jimmy. And her ultimately having to find her place in the world that she feels so lost within. She obviously has a fear of the connection to the spirit world. She doesn't like panicking over knowing something bad is going to happen, someone's going to die. She tries to shun the images she gets, that little man that appears, trying to get rid of him and quiet that voice inside of her. And it ultimately tears her apart. By the end of the novel, it is her coming to terms with that side where she's able to find peace and resolution in her life. Then we have her parents. Her parents very much represent the Western point of view, or the attempt to fit in with the Western point of view and push aside the indigenous traditions and culture. Whenever she mentions the spirit world stuff to her father, I remember the sentence was something like, it was as if I was running around topless in front of him by the look on his face. Like, it is appalling to him even for her to bring that up. The mother is interesting because, as we learn from the grandmother, Mama'u, I think it's pronounced, I'm sorry if it's not, that she was aware of this connection that runs through the bloodline, and she is repressing it. And when she approaches the mother about having these dreams or visions, her mom is like, don't worry, everyone has bad dreams, or just like, it's okay, it'll be fine. That kind of like, just push it aside, ignore it, la 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 la. They are also very supportive of the athleticism of Jimmy, which also represents more of the Western idealism. Sorry, this video is going to be really choppy because I'm like thinking thoughts as I go. But Jimmy's like ambition for swimming and his like athletic dreams, we learn later on, is also him trying to find his place in this world where he is in fact displaced from his roots and history. I'll skip over the secondary characters and just kind of stick with the main ones. Like, there's all her friends and whatnot, which I'm sure we could delve into that, but the other two characters that really stood out for me were the uncle, who I think represents the indigenous anarchist side, the like fight for justice and what's right and trying to correct the wrongs of broken treaties and residential schools and colonization and land issues. And then Mama'u is the other one who represents the traditional connection to that spirit side, and she's the one who helps her connect to that more than anyone else in her life. Okay, now getting into some imagery, land is obviously a very huge topic in the novel. Not only physical, geographical land of the book and the setting, but the indigenous connection to land, the loss of that connection, the robbery of that connection. All of those elements were in this book, along with very strong elements of water imagery. Much like I mentioned before with the Earth Diver stories, water seems to have a healing, rejuvenating kind of effect. And I think since Lisa is living in between these two worlds, I think the idea of water and land connecting but being two worlds, water represents the spirit world. And when she falls into the water, that's when she makes the real connection with the spirit world. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when she comes to terms with her place between the two worlds is on the shore where water and land meet. We also notice her fear of the water through the whole book when she's also afraid of the spirit world. She talks about Jimmy swimming all the time and her like, oh, I could never. She understands that water has power. Water can cure, water can heal, but it can also kill. That's a very big theme in the book too. It's water has killed Jimmy, saves her. Water could kill her at points. And I mean, this whole duality, juxtaposition, two-world thing leads to a lot of imagery about Western mentality versus indigenous tradition. I noticed a lot of that in the food descriptions that they would eat. A lot of the Americanized foods would be like, we ate hot dogs and Kraft dinner with some ketchup. I also believe there was a part about blueberries with her mama'u and talking about the real kind of food from the earth rather than these processed kind of foods. Oh yeah, salmonberry, that was a big thing. So yeah, the juxtaposition there was evident in the description of the foods. Also, I noticed a lot of the Western mentality in the novel and in real life. It deals with like absolutes. Like it's either good or bad, or you're dead or you're alive, or whatnot. Whereas it seems like when the novel was speaking from an indigenous perspective, it wasn't as absolute. It was more like, the spirit world is good, but be cautious of them. And you may die, but you're not really gone. And there's much more to it than just a black and white yes or no. Another big theme throughout there was repression and denial, like repression of history and truth. That was coming up with the parents a lot. Even with their repressing their own history of the relationship with the brother and him disappearing and what it was like when they first met. Lisa was hearing stories about their first meetings and their relationship that she would never have guessed. There's also a denial of her gender, of innocence. There's the whole rape scene, which, like, her innocence is forcibly taken from her, like many other things. Also, there was a lot of bird imagery. There were the crows right from the beginning. I think maybe the first sentence. The crows are always watching her, listening to her. They give her advice. They clearly represent the spirit world. They have a connection to the sky. She is connected to the land, and it's not until she finally connects with the water that she becomes whole. That's interesting. There was also a raven in there, and to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure what the raven would represent that's different from the crows. P.S. I would love any debate, discussion, commentary. Feel free to drop any of that down below. That would be great. And last but not least, we have the title. There's obviously the idea of the Sasquatch being on the island. And there's Jimmy's fascination as a kid with, I would even say, obsession with getting a picture of the Sasquatch. I feel like the Sasquatch may represent the indigenous tradition and culture. Jimmy is forcibly looking for it, and Lisa is confronted by it against her will. Like I said, I may be off on some of these theories, but I'm definitely open to having my mind changed by good debate. The ending was a little bit ambiguous. It's that speedboat she hears in the distance. I don't know if that's in her dreams or in reality. Or maybe it's this newfound mix of the two that we can't quite understand. I enjoyed the ambiguousness of the ending. I sometimes like the story ending on a very, like, fine note. Like, thank you very much, tidied up bow on the package. But I also love a good ambiguous ending that makes you think and leaves you wondering. So, I guess the question I would leave you with for discussion is, do you think Monkey Beach is a real geographical place, or do you think it's in their head? It's all a metaphor for their search for the true indigenous roots and culture? Or is it both? If you ask me, I am leaning more towards it being in their head, a place of fiction. If not that, then I would go with both. It's got to be one of those two. I don't know. Feel free to discuss. Overall, excellent book. If people dig this video, I will do more book reviews. Thank you for hanging out and discussing this book with me. If you did enjoy, please like, subscribe, notification bell, yada yada. And I will have another book review coming out soon, I believe. Thanks so much for hanging out, and have a great one. I'll see you next time. Bye.